Hi, I'm Hannah. Growing up, I had everything a kid could want: loving parents and a cozy home. I was their only kid, and they spoiled me with love, not just stuff. They were big on education too, so after high school, I headed off to college and then landed a job as a travel agent. For over a decade, I hustled at a city travel agency, learning the ropes of the trade. After my folks passed, they left me a bit of money. Nothing crazy, but enough to make me think about starting my own thing. That's how I ended up opening my own travel agency. It was tough in the beginning, like, really tough. I had to scrape and claw for every client I got. But I made it work, and soon enough, the agency started doing alright, even thinking about expanding. I always believed in looking sharp, especially at work and public events. You never know who you're gonna meet, right? So, there I was, a regular at this little salon on the corner of my street, getting my hair done by Marie, a sweet woman in her 60s with hands of magic. We'd chat about everything: my business, her salon, the latest gossip. One day, Marie got all excited while she was washing my hair. "You know, Hannah, I've got a son, Mark. Such a handsome guy, and smart too. But still single. You should meet him." I was a bit taken aback, but went along with it. "Sure, why not? Could be fun." She beamed. "Great. I'll set something up." Fast forward, and I'm sitting across from Mark at a cozy little diner downtown. He was cute, alright, and had a way with numbers, working as a financial expert or something fancy like that. We hit it off, talking about everything from our favorite movies to our crazy work schedules. "You gotta have some crazy stories with a job like yours." "Yeah, there's never a dull moment, that's for sure." "What about you? Any crazy stock market stories?" I sipped my coffee, watching his face light up, talking about his day-to-day. "Nothing too wild. It's mostly numbers and grumpy old men," Mark shrugged, grinning. "But it pays the bills, and then some." We talked for hours, closing the place down. It was easy, comfortable. And just like that, Marie's matchmaking wasn't such a bad idea after all. After Mark and I got hitched, things took a turn. The wedding was a blast, full of laughter and dancing, but the next day it was like I woke up next to a different person. Well, not Mark, he was still the laid-back guy I fell for, but his mom, Marie, she flipped a switch or something. We were having breakfast, just a couple of days after the ceremony, when Marie dropped the bomb. "Hannah, darling, you and Mark should really think about getting a bigger place, you know? Something fitting for a growing family," she said, stirring her tea a bit too vigorously. I choked on my coffee a bit. A bigger place? We just got settled here." Mark chimed in, with that "let's not start a fight" look. "Mom's got a point, Hannah. We could use the extra space. Maybe something with a yard?" I gave him a look. "Sure, I guess. We can start looking." But Marie wasn't just talking about any house. No, she wanted us to buy a huge place, like the kind you see in magazines. And the kicker? She wanted in. Not just as a visitor, but living with us. "Hannah, think about it. If I moved in, I could help out around the house. I'm planning to leave the salon, start something fresh. I've been looking into blogging, maybe a lifestyle thing, you know?" She was all excited, eyes shining. I tried to keep it cool, but inside, I was freaking out. "Blogging, huh? That's interesting. But living together? That's a big step." Marie nodded eagerly. "Exactly. And with my blog, once it takes off, I'll be more than able to contribute." The next thing I knew, I was nodding along, agreeing to house hunt. We ended up with a gorgeous place, way beyond what I thought we needed, but it had that charm, you know? When I saw Marie's eyes light up, I thought, maybe this isn't so bad. Then came moving day. Marie had boxes and boxes of stuff, way more than Mark and I combined. As we unpacked, she directed traffic like a general. No, that box goes in the upstairs hall. And can you put those books in the guest room? It'll be my office." As the weeks went by, Marie's true colors showed. She'd taken over the house, redecorating without asking, and her helping out turned into giving orders. "Hannah, I need you to pick up some things for my new blog setup." "Oh, and we need better lighting in here, it's for the blog." I felt cornered, not just by the bills and the new house, but by this whole new family dynamic I hadn't signed up for. "Alright, I guess. We'll look into it." Lying in bed that night, I turned to Mark. "Do you really think all this is necessary? The house, your mom's blog?" Mark was quick to reassure. "It's all gonna work out, Hannah. Trust me, it's all part of settling in." Settling in, right. I signed up for a husband, not a housemate who doubled as my mother-in-law and lifestyle coach. I drifted off, wondering just how much of my new married life would be spent in the shadow of Marie's grand plans. Living with Marie and Mark was turning out to be tougher than I'd ever imagined. Mark's spending was off the charts. Almost every other day, he'd come home with something pricey, a new watch, some fancy shoes, or talking about his latest round at some upscale golf club. He even set aside a whole room just to store and display his collections of high-end watches and leather shoes. I tried to keep things chic but affordable on my end, believing we weren't at the luxury splurge stage yet. This difference in our spending habits was becoming a regular source of friction between us. "Mark, do we really need more watches? Maybe we should be saving a bit more," I said one evening as he unpacked yet another purchase. "Hannah, I make good money. I should be able to enjoy it," he snapped, not looking up from his new shiny gadget. The conversation always ended there, with him shutting down any further discussion. Meanwhile, Marie was on a roll with her new blogging venture. It had started gaining traction faster than any of us expected. But with the fame, her demands grew too. One day, she came to me with a request, or more accurately, a demand, that took me by surprise. "Hannah, darling, I've been thinking. To keep up with my blog's image, I need to get some work done. A facelift, maybe tweak my nose a bit. You know, freshen up," Marie announced as if discussing the weather. I was flabbergasted. "Marie, that sounds expensive. And cosmetic surgery? Are you sure?" She was all smiles. "Oh, absolutely. It's an investment in my career. And you know, being in the public eye now requires looking my best." I frowned. "But that's a lot of money, Marie. Money that could go to our household needs." Marie's tone shifted, turning sharper. "Hannah, you know how much this blog means to me. It's finally something of my own. I thought you, of all people, would understand." I was about to protest when she played her card. "Besides, it's not just for me. It benefits all of us, doesn't it? And I'd hate for any misunderstandings to crop up between you and Mark because you weren't supportive." Her implication was clear: help her out, or she'd stir trouble with Mark. Knowing how she could influence him, I felt my hands were tied. Despite my reservations, I agreed to finance her procedures. Marie underwent the surgery, and it was all she could talk about afterward. Her blog posts about embracing plastic surgery, not fearing the knife, and the importance of looking good raked in more views and comments than ever before. She was proud, reveling in the attention and praise, while I watched our bank account dwindle and wondered if I'd ever be able to pull us back from this spending spiral. 2 years into our marriage, and it felt like I was the only one truly pulling weight around here. My travel agency had really taken off, and I was proud to say that I was the main breadwinner. Not only did I handle all our bills, but I also paid our mortgage all by myself. Day in and day out, I juggled work, home, and everything in between. At night, I'd cook meals tailored to Marie's special diet, keeping the household running smoothly. To anyone looking from the outside, my life with Mark and his mother Marie looked picture perfect. Marie never missed a chance to gush about our wonderful family life and the beautiful home on her blog, painting a pretty picture for her followers. However, the reality inside our walls was a bit different, especially when it came to Marie's latest obsession, her live streaming. One Tuesday morning, this reality came crashing in during one of her broadcasts. I was in the middle of preparing a dietary breakfast for Marie when she decided it was the perfect time to put me on the spot. The kitchen was bustling, Marie with her phone out, capturing every mundane detail for her followers. "And here's the star of the house, my wonderful daughter-in-law, Hannah," Marie announced, thrusting her phone in my direction as I was halfway through flipping an omelette. "Morning, everyone," I said, managing a tight smile, not wanting to drop the omelette in front of the live audience. "Hannah here is the best when it comes to travel. Tell us, dear, what's the latest in the world of travel?" Marie chirped, the camera focusing on me. Clearing my throat, I set down the spatula. "Well, there are some exciting travel deals coming up, especially for those looking to escape the winter chill." Marie's eyes sparkled with an idea, and she leaned closer, her voice a pitch too cheerful. "Speaking of travel, Hannah, why don't you share with our lovely viewers your fabulous idea for our next family vacation?" "I believe South Africa was mentioned?" I was blindsided. "South Africa?" I echoed, my mind racing. This wasn't just an impromptu Q&A, this was Marie setting the stage for something much bigger. Yes, a luxury trip to South Africa. Safari tours, 5-star hotels, the works. Viewers, wouldn't you just love to see us on safari? I'm sure Hannah can arrange something spectacular. Her followers immediately chimed in with excitement, their comments flooding the live feed. Pressure mounted as I tried to keep my composure. "Well, it's definitely an option," I said, trying to stay non-committal. "But let's discuss it later, off-camera." As soon as Marie ended the stream, I turned to her, frustration bubbling over. "Marie, we need to talk about this. You can't just plan things and announce them without discussing them with me first, especially not live." Marie was unflappable as ever, sipping her coffee. "Oh, lighten up, Hannah. It's good for the blog. And good for your business too, don't you think?" "It's not about the blog," I pushed back, feeling cornered. "It's about respecting each other's roles in this family. You can't use your followers to pressure me into decisions." I left the room, leaving Marie to make her far-reaching plans. That evening, things escalated when she complained to Mark. She spun the story, painting me as rude and dismissive of her ideas, claiming I was getting too big for my boots. Mark stormed into the kitchen where I was cleaning up. His face was thunderous. "Hannah, we need to talk. Now." He didn't wait for my response, just marched into the living room and I followed, my stomach in knots. He spun around, his words sharp as knives. "Mom tells me you're disrespecting her ideas, acting like you're the one who calls all the shots. That's not how we're supposed to work as a family." I was taken aback, the unfairness of the accusation stinging. "Mark, that's not true. I've always supported your mom, but nothing, Hannah. You know how important her blog is to her. And if you can't support us, maybe you shouldn't be part of this family," he interrupted, his voice cold. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I tried to reason with him, to explain my side, but he was having none of it. "I've even prepared divorce papers, Hannah. I keep them just in case you decide not to follow through with our plans." The words felt like a slap. I spent the night in our guest room, crying, feeling more alone than ever. The idea that Mark would keep such a thing ready was heartbreaking. The next morning, still reeling from the night's threats, I felt a wave of nausea that wouldn't pass. It was more than stress, something was off. I called in sick at work and made my way to the doctor's office, the weight of the world on my shoulders. Sitting in the sterile doctor's office, I was going through the motions, answering questions mechanically until the doctor gave me the news that shifted everything. "You're pregnant," he said, looking at me over his glasses. Pregnant. The word echoed in my mind, a beacon of hope in the turmoil of my marital strife. At 37, this was a moment I had hoped for, but never let myself believe would happen. Despite the chaos at home, this news filled a space in my heart with pure joy. I went home, a plan forming. Maybe this baby was a sign, a reason to mend fences. I found Mark in the office, his demeanor still frosty. "Mark, I went to the doctor today," I started, my voice steady, despite the shaking inside. He looked up, wary. "And?" And, we're going to have a baby, I said, letting the words hang in the air. The change in Mark was instantaneous. His face softened, the edges of anger smoothing out. He stood up, coming over to wrap me in his arms. Really? That's great, Hannah. I'm sorry about last night. Things will be different now. Relief washed over me, mingled with caution. But there was work to be done if I was going to keep this family together. In a move to bridge the gap, I took the initiative to plan the trip to South Africa that Marie had so publicly put on the agenda. I threw myself into the arrangements, booking excursions to Cape Town and Johannesburg, a safari in a national reserve, and trips to both a desert and lush waterfalls. The trip to South Africa was supposed to be a fresh start, a way to mend the growing rifts at home. Instead, it spiraled into a disaster from the very start. As soon as we boarded the plane, Marie began complaining about everything, the length of the flight, the turbulence, and even the meals served on board. It's way too long. How could you book such an uncomfortable flight, Hannah? Marie grumbled as another wave of turbulence shook the cabin. Trying to keep my tone even, I replied, Marie, it's the shortest route available. There's nothing I can do about the flight duration or the turbulence. Her complaints didn't let up, and by the time we landed, I was already exhausted. But that was just the beginning. At the hotel, Marie's dissatisfaction found new targets. The moment we checked in, she started on about the hotel not living up to its online reputation. This place? This is where we're staying? I expected something far better, given the pictures online. Hannah, are you sure this is the right hotel? She criticized loudly as we stood at reception. Mark, as always, was quick to back her up. Yeah, Hannah, Mom's got a point. It doesn't look like what we saw on the website. Feeling the sting of their joint disapproval, I managed to say, this is one of the best-rated hotels in the area. I'm sorry it's not what you expected, but let's try to make the best of it. Despite my efforts to keep things positive, Marie's and Mark's displeasure only deepened. Marie found fault with every aspect of the hotel, from the service to the food, and Mark echoed her every sentiment. It didn't help that I was feeling increasingly unwell, the early stages of my pregnancy making it hard to keep up with the demanding schedule of tours and activities I had planned. The tipping point came after yet another day of excursions that neither of them enjoyed. Marie summoned me to her room for a serious talk. The moment I entered, she launched into a tirade. Hannah, you are by far the worst travel specialist I've ever seen. You've completely ruined our trip, she accused, her voice sharp and cold. Stunned, I tried to defend my efforts. Marie, I've arranged everything according to what we discussed. I'm trying my best here. But she wasn't having any of it. Grabbing my arm, she nearly shouted, Get out of here, Hannah. Stop ruining our vacation. Before I could react, she pushed me out and slammed the door. Shaken, I returned to my room, only to find my suitcase outside the door. Mark was there, his expression hard and unsympathetic. I can't deal with this anymore, Hannah. You being sick all the time, it's too much. I think it's best if you leave, he said, his voice void of the warmth I once knew. Feeling a mix of disbelief and heartbreak, I picked up my suitcase. Without a word, I left the hotel. I felt incredibly unwell, my body and mind pushed to their limits. At that moment, all I wanted was to be back in the safety of my own home in the USA. The flight back was agonizing. Every turbulence shook me not just physically, but also emotionally, my stomach churning with pain and distress. I landed back home with a sharp ache that seemed to gnaw deeper with each passing moment. Instead of the comfort of home, my first stop was the emergency room. The diagnosis confirmed my worst fears. I had suffered a miscarriage. As I lay there, trying to process the loss, my phone lit up with countless missed calls from Mark and Marie. With a heavy heart, I called back, only to be thrust into another chaotic situation. Marie's voice crackled through the line, frantic and demanding. Hannah, it's all gone wrong here. We've been robbed, our documents, our money, everything. And it's gotten even worse, she blurted out, barely pausing for breath. Trying to steady my voice, I asked. What happened, Marie? She continued, her voice tinged with panic. We were out, and I was filming for my blog, just a normal day, when someone snatched our bags. And when I complained about it to the hotel staff, they were so rude, I had to tell them off. They called the police on us, and now we're in jail. You have to help us, Hannah. Her words swirled in my head, piling onto the mountain of stress I was already under. Marie, I'm in the hospital, I said, my voice breaking. I've had a miscarriage. There was a brief silence on the line. Then Mark's voice came through, his tone anger and impatience. It doesn't matter, Hannah, we really need you right now. This is serious, we could be stuck here. The lack of sympathy, the sheer audacity to dismiss my pain so quickly, it was like a slap in the face. I'm not going to help you. Handle it yourselves. Without waiting for a response, I hung up, a mix of anger, sorrow, and disbelief coursing through me. In that lonely hospital room, as I grieved the child I would never hold, I made a silent vow to myself. I would start anew, rebuild, and never let my sense of self be compromised again. The day I was discharged from the hospital marked the start of my new life. I went straight home to finalize the severance of my ties to Mark and Marie. With a steady hand, I signed the divorce papers that Mark had prepared earlier. Afterward, I gathered every item that belonged to him and his mother, clothes, personal belongings, the countless shoes, and watches that had filled our space with the excess of their lives. Everything was packed up and delivered to their cramped old apartment in the city. With that chapter closed, I took the next step. I sold the house I had bought with my hard-earned money, the house that was meant to be a home for us but never truly felt like one. Selling it was freeing, not just from the mortgage and the memories, but from the life I was so desperately trying to fit into. 2 months passed, and Mark and Marie were deported back from South Africa, arriving with nothing but the clothes on their backs and a phone in their hands. Their shock was palpable when they found strangers living in their home. The new owners, uninterested in their plight, threatened to call the police if they didn't clear off their property. Marie's voice was shaking with fury when she called me. Hannah, what the hell is going on? Where are all our things? Why are strangers in our house? I replied with a calm I hardly felt. Marie, the house was mine. I paid for it, and it was in my name. I've sold it. All your things are in your old apartment. As for Mark and you, I'm done. We're divorced. I won't be dragged back into your chaos. There was a pause, the kind that told me she was struggling to grasp her new reality. You can't do this to us, Hannah. We have rights, she insisted. I've done everything by the book, Marie. You're going to have to accept that. Goodbye. Hanging up the phone felt like shedding a heavy coat in the middle of summer, sudden and immensely relieving. The news eventually came to me through mutual acquaintances that Marie had returned to her job as a hairstylist. Her dreams of blog stardom abandoned alongside her expensive camera equipment. Mark, unable to resume his old job due to his long absence, resorted to driving a taxi. He sold his precious watch collection and wore plain, unbranded clothing. As for me, I moved into a small house on the outskirts of the city. Here, I began rebuilding not just my home but my travel agency as well. The expo was a turning point. People were genuinely interested, and their enthusiasm reignited my own. Your tours always have that personal touch. How do you do it? A curious visitor asked, her eyes scanning the brochures. It's all about understanding what the traveler wants. You listen, adapt, and sometimes, take a leap of faith, I explained, the conversation flowing easily. The expo was more than a success, and before long, I was planning expansions, considering even a potential branch in Europe. One evening, after a long day of meetings, I stopped by a small cafe, a little celebration of my progress. As I sipped my coffee, a young couple at the next table was poring over travel brochures, looking utterly confused. Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear. Are you planning a trip? I asked, the remnants of my shyness about intruding quickly swept away by my enthusiasm. Yes, but we're so lost. It's our first big trip together, and we want it to be perfect. the woman said, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and frustration. I smiled, pulling out a business card. Here, give me a call tomorrow at this number. I'll help you sort it out. Travel's supposed to be fun, not stressful. They thanked me profusely, their smiles wide and genuine. It felt good to be able to help, to use my expertise to make someone's experience better. It reminded me why I loved this job in the first place.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked. We could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.